It's time, you guys. It's time for me to join that small elite group of YouTubers that take it upon themselves to start criticizing the very platform that they are on. Are you ready for that? Because I know that I am. But yes, Trevark, what are you talking about? Oh, hey friend, I'll tell you, gladly. So right now we're in December of 2020, and recently YouTube announced a new decision. They are now going to be removing some videos that are putting out what they say is election misinformation or information that disputes an election, things that they deem that are just bad for our republic that we're living in. And I would just like to begin by saying this. What I'm about to say to you is my personal opinion, kind of just a guy spewing information out on the internet, and I don't have, any extra information that you don't have access to, so I think we're just going to take a look at it from that basis. So for the people that aren't aware, recently there was an election, a presidential election, between a Mr. Biden and a Mr. Trump, and Biden came out with more votes and more electoral votes, but Trump is disputing the election. That's kind of like the layman's term here, okay? We're not going to get into any sort of nitty-gritty. Now, my personal opinion is that Biden has won the election. I don't think that the election was stolen. That being said, though, I do have a pretty big contention with what we're allowing YouTube to do here, and I'd like to go into that specifically. Now, in order to do that, we're going to take a look at this article here. It's by The Verge, and it says YouTube will now remove videos disputing Joe Biden's election victory a month after the election. It says, on Wednesday, YouTube announced that it will begin removing any content alleging widespread voter fraud influenced the outcome of the 2020 United States presidential election. In the immediate aftermath of the November 3rd election, YouTube came under fire for allowing channels to publish videos making false claims about election results. So, on its face, all of these things seem like they're always great ideas, but always my alarm bells are going off. But I want to go a little bit farther before we go into the nitty-gritty of how I feel about this. And we have two different articles we're going to be looking at. In one instance, One America News Network, a verified YouTube channel, published a video declaring, and that's such a weird thing to say too, a verified YouTube channel. Meaning what? They're like part of the partner program, so they have 1,000 subscribers and like 4,000 hours of watch time? Which, okay. They make it sound like when they say verified YouTube channel that YouTube is like hand-picking these guys. Anyways. Published a video declaring that Trump won the election. At the time, YouTube defended its decision to let the video stand, saying in a statement, like other companies, we're allowing these videos because discussion of election results and the process of counting votes is allowed on YouTube. And I think that's a very fair response to that criticism. Why YouTube's even being criticized on this is kind of ridiculous. But anyways, I digress. Let's continue. The company went on to say that content from authoritative news organizations were the most popular videos about the election. And it's Wednesday, yeah, it's kind of hard for that not to be when you funnel everybody into like 3 companies, if you try to look something up, it tosses you to CNN or MSNBC or Fox, dude. Like seriously, if you watch any video, I feel like it's gonna then recommend you to those big guys all of the time, or it's gonna recommend you to Joe Rogan. Oh my gosh, how many times I've clicked on a video of Joe Rogan, and all of a sudden that's all that's down my recommended thing now. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk about how I don't like to be recommended Joe Rogan. Especially when I say not interested. Come on, YouTube, get real. Totally different issue, though. Starting Wednesday, YouTube will begin removing any new content that misleads viewers about the outcome of the 2020 election. In the post, YouTube said its election information panels had surfaced over 200,000 election-related videos and were shown over 4.5 billion times. The company said that it would update these panels Wednesday, linking into Electoral College results provided by the Office of the Federal Register, calling Biden the official president-elect. It's one thing, I think, to link into President Biden as the presidential-elect. I think it's another thing entirely to remove these videos. Now, that just kind of goes over the gist of this. Now that we know what the real crux of the issue is, I want to take a look at more of an opinion piece here. And this is from somebody, and this is why. This is the kind of people that go after things like this and push for policies like this, and this is why I think it's important to take a look at it, because we want to take a look at what Becca Lewis has to say here, where she says, I warned in 2018 YouTube was fueling far-right extremism. Here's what the platform should be doing. We're going to go off the headline right away here. I warned in 2018 YouTube was fueling far-right extremism. And before we really take a look at that, I want to ask you guys a question. Does a road cause car accidents? Does a road fuel road rage? Does a road fuel drunk driving? Does a road fuel hit and runs? I don't think so. I think cars might, and I think the people in the cars might make decisions that lead to things like that, but I think it'd be weird to blame the road, and I think that in this situation, YouTube is the road. It's the platform that we're all using here, and YouTube should really take, this is the opinion part, should really take a hands-off approach and let people post what people want to post. It should be the Wild West of the internet, and that's what should be great. They shouldn't be picking and choosing what information is and isn't allowed. I mean, how do you even distinguish between something like a parody about the election or something that's actual information about the election? I feel like we get into really gross territory when we start telling people what they can and cannot put out there for information when it comes to YouTube, especially when people look at YouTube, and they should take it with a little bit of a grain of salt that it is a public platform like that. And then this person says, you know, here's what the platform should be doing. Okay, so what Becca Lewis is implying here is that YouTube's not doing a good enough job of fighting far-right extremism. And here's one thing I'll throw out right now. Far-right extremism. Define it, lady. So it says, YouTube's attempts to stay apolitical has kept it tied up in knots, focusing decisions on small technicalities. And you know what? YouTube needs to stay apolitical. It seems like the implication here is that YouTube shouldn't be apolitical, and YouTube should pick a side. Oh, all right, but only if it's your side, right, Becca Lewis? In the fall of 2018, I released a research report warning of a growing trend of far-right radicalization on YouTube. Specifically, identified a loosely connected network of reactionary YouTubers, ranging from mainstream conservatives and libertarians all the way to overt white supremacists and neo-Nazis, who were all broadcasting their political ideas to young audiences. Oh yeah, how dare they? How dare people who have a personal opinion about anything really, including politics, how dare they broadcast to people out on the internet when it's not your opinion, of course. They're tethered together by a shared opposition to social justice warriors and the mainstream media. They frequently collaborated with each other and amplified each other's content. In the process, they made it extremely easy for a viewer to move bit by bit into more extremist content. The following March, I watched in horror along with much of the rest of the world as a white supremacist gunman killed 51 people and injured 40 more at the Al Noor Mosque and the Linwood Islamic Center in Christchurch, New Zealand. Yeah, as if that's YouTube's fault. As if that's relevant to what we're even talking about right now. As if it would be appropriate to bring up any sort of far-left terror and then blame YouTube for allowing people like Kyle Kalinske or the Young Turks to be on their platform, as if they're responsible for that. Give me a break. Throughout the chaos of the day, researchers parsed his manifesto and found that under the layers of irony and memes, the message was quite clear. He had been radicalized to believe in the Great Replacement, a white nationalist conspiracy theory that claims that white populations are being purposely replaced with often Muslim immigrants. The guy was crazy. I mean, anyone who does that isn't there in the head. The shooter's manifesto clearly spelled out his racist and Islamophobic beliefs, but it's provided scant information on how he came to embrace them. Oh, and what is it, Becca? Are you going to tell us how? Is it YouTube's fault? Did YouTube push him into that? Is that right? YouTube caused this guy to commit this crime? Oh, fascinating. That's crazy. Not when anything else ever happens, but in this case, it's because he was watching stuff that you don't agree with. You found one of millions of people that are watching content that did something crazy, and now you're gonna try to shut down that content. Yeah, you're a great person, Becca. This article's making me kind of crazy. Everyone should be allowed to talk. Isn't that like the great beauty of the internet? So why are you trying to control what people are able to consume? Even if it's not necessarily the best information out there, I don't know if I really trust you, Becca, to be the arbiter in this, to really tell us what is and isn't okay, Mom? Is that alright? Alright, so it says we got a full picture after this. The Christchurch shooter was radicalized on YouTube. How dare you, YouTube? By many of the propagandists myself and other researchers had warned about. So why didn't YouTube take action sooner? And what should they be doing now? What should YouTube have been doing? That's like the real question. Not letting people put videos on the internet? Sounds kind of like a slippery slope to me. There are a million different ways YouTube could have been and could be now taking action. They could enforce their terms of service more aggressively. Nice. or make those terms more robust. Yeah, because that's what people on YouTube want, is YouTube terms to be enforced a bit more aggressively, right? Isn't that what we're all asking for as viewers on YouTube? Just for them to be a little bit more controlling about everything? Isn't that what, like, if you polled everyone on YouTube, wouldn't they all agree that that's the best course of action, is for YouTube just to be a control freak about all of the information that we're able to consume? Wouldn't you like a company like Google, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, to be able to pick and choose what you're allowed to consume for information instead of allowing you to make your own choices about the information that you're allowed to consume? Yeah, that sounds like the world that I want to live in. Thanks, Becca. There are a million different ways. Name them then. Doubt you can name a million of them. There are a million different ways YouTube could have been, and could be now, taking action. They can enforce their terms of service more aggressively, or make those terms more robust. They can make changes to their algorithm so it stops recommending ever more extreme content. It doesn't. It funnels people to Fox News. They could deprioritize borderline content that acts as a first step to radicalization. That's an interesting thing, actually, in and of itself right there, because what is borderline content? And I think that you'd be surprised at what she'd point out. And would it surprise you if I told you that by borderline content, what these people are referring to are channels like PewDiePie? We need to take a look at a core piece of information here, and that is the pyramid of hate. Now, the pyramid of hate is supposed to demonstrate how these borderline content can lead to very, very, very horrible things to happen. And you can see here it starts with biased attitudes, which lead to acts of bias, which lead to discrimination, which lead to bias-motivated violence, which lead to genocide. Now, here is the real problem with this, is anybody and everybody can fall on this pyramid and can be censored if this pyramid is what we're going by. And I'll tell you how. You see, because there's some things that we all agree that are bad and that countries and YouTube shouldn't allow. And that the top of this pyramid here, that's one thing that we can all agree is horrible and should never be allowed. This next one is something that we should all agree can never be allowed. And it's pretty obvious what that is too. Like, it's easy to look at something and be like, yep, that's an example of the top of the pyramid right there. But as we go farther down the pyramid, it gets harder and harder to tell if it's happening until we hit the bottom of the pyramid. Now, here's the real problem, is when we're at the bottom of the pyramid, all we're looking at are biased attitudes, which are, as an example, stereotyping, not good, insensitive remarks, kind of wishy-washy on that one, right? Fear of differences, non-inclusive language, microaggressions, justifying biases by seeking out like-minded people, accepting negative or misinformation / screening out positive information. So none of these things are necessarily good things, of course, but aren't there quite a few situations where you'd say something and someone could say, hey, I don't know if that's necessarily inclusive language, and maybe you didn't mean it that way, and it could... Can you see how, like, this bottom thing encompasses a lot of people and how it's so broad that it's able to basically encompass everybody at some point with something that they've said? And that's kind of the scary part too here, because if we jump back to what Becca is saying back in this article, she is saying you deprioritize borderline content that acts as first steps to radicalization. Now, let's not forget here, guys, what she's talking about. This is kind of why I brought up the pyramid here. The first steps of radicalization that she is talking about is the bottom of the pyramid. She's saying this is the beginning of radicalization. These are people like PewDiePie who will make a joke. These are people like the YouTubers that you watch that will make a joke. And then as soon as they're labeled as like bullying or anything like that, all of a sudden, because they're on this period, they're pushing people on the path to genocide. What? That's what this person is accusing YouTube of and criticizing YouTube of. And I think we should be very clear that what Becca is saying to YouTube is that nothing would ever be enough when it comes to YouTube regulating content. And because of that, I don't think we should really be listening. I don't think YouTube should be listening to this Becca person. I think she's kind of bonkers. Let's continue. So, stops recommending ever more extreme content. I mean, define that. Define ever more extreme content, because what's extreme to you might not be extreme to me, man. Maybe I think your makeup videos are extreme to me. Maybe we should get rid of those too, if that's the standard we're gonna have. It's a gross race to the bottom that I don't want to participate in with you, Becca. They could deprioritize borderline content that acts as a first step to radicalization. I would love for you to define borderline content, because what it sounds like is kind of like a rules for thee but not for me sort of thing, because I could find a reason that everybody is a little bit more like borderline content, right? They could refine their content moderation algorithms to catch content more effectively. These are just platitudes. What she's saying doesn't mean anything, you guys. She's not calling for anything. What she's calling for is censorship of stuff that she doesn't believe in. And in fact, YouTube consistently claims it has done many of those things because it tries to. I mean, you don't see people getting beheaded on YouTube. That's what YouTube should be worried about, is stuff that doesn't break the law. But you're talking about people's thoughts that disagree with you, and you're trying to censor people's thoughts because you think it's a path to radicalization. Well, what if those people think that you're a path to radicalization right now? Because I think what you're proposing here, Becca, is pretty radical. And yet there is often a great disconnect between what actions YouTube says it's taking and what users and creators actually experience. Yeah, because there's millions of people on the platform, there's billions of people that use YouTube, okay? It's kind of a hard thing to manage, all right? And people are gonna upload some crazy stuff out there, okay? And people wanna watch what they wanna watch. You ever think maybe sometimes it's like, I just wanna watch a flat earth documentary because it would be fun? You know, I don't care that it's the wrong information. I watch Star Wars and I don't think to myself, oh, this is real. I'm able to separate real from fake, and I don't think that I need you to tell me what's fake and what's extreme, okay? This is in part because these actions mean little if the platform has no idea of how it defines hate speech. Exactly. So define it for us, Becca. Extremism, harassment, or borderline content, and what values it seeks to uphold in its actions. Yeah, it's all about values, huh? Indeed, YouTube has often backed itself into a corner by attempting to stay as apolitical as possible and turning deeply value-based judgment into the parsing of minor details. Yeah, the way it should be. I mean, if you're going to kick somebody off, they should have broken a very specific, provable rule. Not because you think that they are leading people down radicalization, even though you have no direct examples of them saying anything that broke the rules. Because now you're reading people's minds, Becca, and you see how that gets a little bit weird? You see how people might not trust you to be the arbiter of this when you're just saying that it goes off of your ability to read people's minds? Kind of crazy. In an attempt to avoid accusations of politicized censorship, which is a good thing that they do want to avoid, the platform has frequently tied itself up in knots, focusing their decisions on the smallest technicalities when determining whether a piece of content has violated its terms. Yeah, it'd be better if they just like banned everybody slightly right or left of center and only allowed centrist people. Like Bernie Sanders might be leading people down to a radical ideology. Maybe we should ban Bernie Sanders off of YouTube because he's pushing people away from the center, from what's normal. The great irony is that by attempting to stay apolitical, YouTube consistently makes the political choice not to care about or protect vulnerable communities. So by not acting, they're acting, I guess, is like the great lesson here. But here's the real irony of what you're suggesting there, Becca, is that the alternative is that they actually act against one side. So what do you want from YouTube here? It can tweak its algorithms and update its policies. And you know what? YouTube is acting, by the way. It does try to moderate as best as it can. But that's the thing, is where do you draw that line? Because you haven't, you're like, Becca says the problem is YouTube doesn't have a clear definition of extremism and radicalization and all of these things. You don't have a good definition of that, Becca. You have yet to lay one out for us. So I don't even know what you're talking about. I doubt we agree it's the same thing, is kind of the problem. It can tweak its algorithms and update its policies as much as it likes, but it won't truly address underlying issues until it makes a firm commitment to protect Muslim creators and users of YouTube and to stop the spread of Islamophobia on their platform. Like, what does that mean? These things all sound good, but what are you talking about? What is, like, give me what that means, please. This does not mean stating that this commitment clearly. Although that would be a reasonable first step, YouTube could, for example, follow the example of the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and apologize for the role it played in facilitating the terrorist attack. It didn't play a role in facilitating a terrorist attack any more than the road played a role in facilitating your car accident, okay? That's crazy. Do you guys get that, right? You get how crazy this is? I'm not, like, alone in thinking that this is just bonkers, you know? Because despite YouTube's claims to be taking hate speech seriously, Islamophobia is still alive and well on the platform. Ben Shapiro, the conservative pundit who frequently promotes Islamophobic ideas, is thriving on YouTube. And here's actually, I think, where we'll jump off that, because it kind of illustrates exactly what my point is. Because there are quite a bit of people who wouldn't count Ben Shapiro as a radical. They would count him as a pretty, I mean, he's right-wing, of course, but I don't think he really says anything crazy that I've ever heard, and I would put him in the same camp. Like, if this is the center, and Bernie Sanders, this might be reversed for you guys, but you get what I'm saying. If this is the center and Bernie Sanders is over here, Ben Shapiro is equal, if not less, as far away from the center as Bernie Sanders. And what's something? Give me a quote. Give me an example of something Islamophobic that Ben Shapiro has said. And you can't, because you know what? If he did, he'd be out of there. He'd be kicked off of the platform, you guys. People who actually do things like that are removed from the platform if they're high profile. And this lies in the crux here. You're not calling for... you're saying you want YouTube to help with all of this stuff and to create a better community, but your idea of what a better community is twisted in your head to mean people that don't disagree with you, and that's gross. That's disgusting. YouTube is built to allow all voices there, whether you agree with them or you disagree with them. There are so many people that I disagree with, that you guys disagree with on YouTube, that should be allowed to have YouTube channels and should be allowed to put their videos out there for people to see. You know why? Because I could be wrong about those people and you could be wrong about those people. It's not our job to be the moral arbiters for other people, and it's not Becca's job here to start talking about radicalization. Do you see how when she talks about like Islamophobia and radicalization, in your head, in my head, I'm picturing like a skinhead, like a neo-Nazi dude, and I'm thinking, yeah, that dude probably shouldn't be like talking about killing people and starting a genocide or anything like that. Like that's like, if he's saying that, he should probably be removed. So I kind of agree with you, Becca. But she throws out a guy like Ben Shapiro, and you're like, yeah, okay, I guess. I don't know if we're on the same page there, my friend. Becca, I don't know if we're on the same page, you guys. And I think that these two things go together. The one thing, YouTube expanding its censorship and removing election information, and then people like Becca who push YouTube to do things like that, because I do think that they are connected. And I think we should be very wary about allowing YouTube to expand its control on things like that, because it's very easy for these things to go out of control. And how do we know that the person who's in charge of this process isn't just looking at information that they disagree with and labeling it as something that is misinformation and then just having it removed that way? I don't think we should be trusting these people to control the information that we're able to consume. We, as human beings, should be able to decide for ourselves what is important and what isn't important, and what information that we want to consume. And we don't need people like Becca to come into our lives to tell us that we're too dumb to know that we're walking down a path of radicalization. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. The millions of people that watch things like that, and then you pick one person out that did something bad, and you're gonna blame YouTube and that entire community for something like that. Meanwhile, there are things that have happened across the left wing, like that, what they're shooting at the baseball game. That was a Bernie Sanders supporter and a Young Turk supporter. Oh, but you know what? That's not Bernie Sanders, and that's not Young Turk's fault. That was that crazy individual's fault. All right? Nothing more and nothing less than that. The guy who did the New Zealand thing, he did that. Not YouTube. YouTube didn't pull the trigger, all right? So to blame this is just, it's crazy, you guys. It's blatant censorship that they're calling for, but they hide it in the guise of caring about you. And I think that we should be very vigilant about that, and just know something, that when people try to be tyrannical over you, they always have good reasons. Always be wary of that. Nobody ever is being tyrannical for like a bad reason. It's always for your safety, and it's always for your health. And we should always take it with a grain of salt, and kind of give people a little side look when they say, no, it's for your safety. Because you know who should be worried about your safety more? You should be worried about your safety more, and you should know how to protect yourself more. Not Becca. I'm sorry, Becca. You don't know me. I don't know you. I don't trust you to make decisions for me, and I don't trust you to make decisions for a community of billions of people because you think that things are radical. Thanks for watching, guys. You have a good day.